A single mom saved a man from a truck, unaware he was a mafia boss who would claim her. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Mia Turner wasn't expecting much that rainy night. As a single mom working double shifts, life had become a constant cycle of exhaustion and worry. But as she was driving home from the hospital, barely keeping her eyes open after another long night, fate had other plans. The storm had turned the streets of New York into a blur of water and headlights. And just as Mia was approaching a sharp turn, something caught her eye. A large truck skidding out of control. Her heart raced as she instinctively swerved, braking hard, and managed to avoid a crash herself, but not before hearing the deafening sound of metal twisting. Without thinking, Mia pulled over and rushed toward the wreck. The truck had come to a stop, its front end smashed into the guardrail. The driver was unconscious, his face obscured by blood and rain. Mia didn't hesitate. She pulled the door open, grimacing at the sight of the man, who appeared to be in his mid-30s, with dark hair and a rugged, handsome face. His clothes were expensive, too expensive for someone who appeared to be in such a mess. She shook him gently, trying to rouse him. When his eyelids fluttered, she helped him sit up, ignoring the rising panic in her chest. Mia wasn't a doctor, but she'd been around emergencies long enough to know he needed medical help fast. She carefully supported him, leading him to her car, unsure if it was a good idea, but not wanting to leave him on the side of the road. As she drove to the nearest emergency room, she noticed that the man's breathing was labored, but he was still alive. Mia's mind raced. Who was this man? Why was he driving so recklessly? And why did she feel like something wasn't right? By the time they reached the hospital, paramedics had arrived, and the man was quickly transferred to an emergency room. Mia, her hands trembling, stayed in the waiting area, trying to calm herself. She had a million questions running through her head. As she sat there, lost in thought, she felt a presence beside her. A deep, authoritative voice broke through her thoughts. You saved him. Mia looked up to find a tall man in a dark suit standing there, his eyes cold and calculating. But there was something about his gaze that made her feel unsettled. His sharp features, the way he carried himself. This man wasn't just anyone. He'll be fine, he said, as though he had all the answers. You don't need to worry. Mia's heart raced as she tried to process who this man was. Who are you? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He didn't respond immediately, only studied her with a strange intensity. You don't need to know, he said finally, his words chilling. But you should know that you've made a decision tonight. A decision that will change everything. Mia felt the weight of his words sink in, but before she could ask any more questions, the man turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, confused and uneasy. She had no idea that this brief encounter would lead her into a world of power, danger, and a man who would claim her as his own. Mia couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It had been 2 days since the accident, and she couldn't stop thinking about the man she had helped. Vincent Russo, the mysterious man who had walked into the hospital like he owned the place, had made her feel uneasy from the very first moment. His presence was too commanding, too intense. She tried to push the thoughts from her mind as she sat in the small coffee shop, trying to enjoy a few quiet moments before heading back to her shift at the hospital. But even here, in this quiet corner of her world, her mind kept drifting back to him. Who was he really? What did he want from her? Her thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of her phone. She glanced at the screen, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the name. Vincent Russo. She hesitated for a moment before answering. Hello. Her voice was shaky, and she cursed herself for sounding so uncertain. Mia. Vincent's deep voice came through the phone with its usual calm intensity. I need to see you. See me? Mia's voice wavered. She wasn't sure if she was ready to face him again. After all, she had just helped him because it was the right thing to do. She hadn't signed up for any further involvement. I have something important to discuss, he continued, his tone leaving no room for argument. Meet me at the Romano building at 7 p.m. Before Mia could protest, he hung up. She sat there, staring at the phone in disbelief. What could he possibly want? The Romano building was one of the most exclusive office complexes in the city, known for its high security and even higher profile tenants. It wasn't a place for someone like her. But what choice did she have? She couldn't ignore him. Not after everything that had happened. That evening, Mia stood in front of the Romano building, her heart racing. The marble facade gleamed under the streetlights, an imposing structure that seemed to tower over her. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The lobby was as luxurious as she had imagined, with gold-trimmed columns and a crystal chandelier that sparkled above her head. A man in a black suit greeted her as soon as she entered. "Ms. Turner," he said, his voice smooth and professional. "Mr. Russo is expecting you." Mia nodded, her stomach doing flips as she followed him to the elevator. When the doors opened on the 15th floor, she was greeted by another man in a suit who led her down a long hallway. The air felt thick with tension, and Mia couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a trap. As they reached the end of the hall, the door to a large office opened, revealing Vincent standing by the window, looking out over the city. He turned when he heard her approach, his dark eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. "Mia," he said softly, as if they were old friends. "I'm glad you came." Mia swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. "What is this about, Vincent?" she asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. Vincent didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer. To her, his presence overwhelming. "I want to make sure you're safe," he said, his voice low and serious. "You've seen things you shouldn't have, things that could put you in danger." Mia felt her breath catch. "Danger?" she repeated. She had a feeling she knew exactly where this was going. "Yes," he confirmed. "And I can protect you. You don't have to worry about anything anymore." Mia stepped back, her mind racing. "I didn't ask for your protection," she said firmly, though she couldn't help the flutter in her chest. She didn't want to be here, didn't want to be dragged into this man's dangerous world. But something in his gaze, something in the way he spoke, made it clear that he wasn't asking. "You don't have a choice," Vincent said, his voice cold but strangely reassuring. "You belong with me now, Mia." The words hung in the air between them, and Mia felt a shiver run down her spine. She wanted to refuse, to walk away, but something about Vincent, something about the way he looked at her, made her hesitate. She wasn't sure what it was, but she knew she couldn't walk away from him. Not now. Mia stood frozen, her mind spinning as Vincent's words hung in the air. "You belong with me now." The weight of his declaration pressed down on her chest, suffocating her, and for a moment, she couldn't breathe. She wanted to scream, to push him away, but the way he was looking at her, his gaze unwavering, made it impossible to act on her instinct to flee. It was as if every part of her wanted to resist, but another part was drawn to him, compelled by something she didn't fully understand. She stepped back, trying to put some space between them. "I didn't ask for this," she said, her voice trembling despite her attempt to sound firm. Vincent didn't move. He simply watched her, as if waiting for her to come to the inevitable conclusion. His silence was more powerful than any words he could have spoken. Mia wanted to fight him, wanted to run, but deep down, she knew he was right. She had already seen too much, and whether she wanted it or not, she was now tied to him in a way she couldn't escape. "You're not safe, Mia," he said, his tone softening for the first time. "Not in this city, not with what you know." Mia's heart raced. She wasn't sure if she should be terrified or relieved by the sincerity in his voice. "I can take care of you," he continued, taking a small step forward. "I can protect you from everything." Mia's hands clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms as she tried to fight back the wave of conflicting emotions. She had a daughter to care for, a life that was already complicated enough without a mafia boss stepping into it. "I don't want your protection," she said through gritted teeth, though her voice faltered. "I don't need you to protect me." Vincent took another step closer, his presence looming over her, and Mia felt a shiver run down her spine. He was dangerous, she knew that, but there was something in the way he stood, the way he spoke, that made her question everything she thought she knew about herself. "You don't have a choice," he said, his voice steady but commanding. "You're already in this, Mia, whether you like it or not." She opened her mouth to argue, but the words died in her throat as she looked up at him, meeting his gaze. His eyes were intense, dark, and full of an undeniable certainty. He wasn't asking for her to accept this. He was telling her that it was already done. I'm not asking you to like it, he continued, his voice softer now, but still full of that quiet authority. I'm just asking you to trust me. Mia felt her breath catch in her throat. Trust him? How could she trust a man like him? A man who lived in a world of shadows, a world that had no place for her. But as she stood there, facing him, a part of her, one she didn't want to acknowledge, was already starting to believe him. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vincent paused for a moment, his eyes never leaving hers. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black card. He handed it to her without a word. Mia took it, her fingers brushing against his for just a moment. It was a business card, but it was more than that. It was an invitation into his world, one that Mia wasn't sure she was ready to enter. Call me when you're ready, he said. I'll be waiting. With that, he turned and walked out of the office, leaving Mia standing there, holding the card, her mind racing with everything that had just happened. She knew she couldn't go back to her old life now. She was in this, for better or worse, and Vincent Russo was a part of it. What she didn't know was just how much he would change her life in ways she couldn't yet understand. Mia spent the next few days in a haze, trying to ignore the black card Vincent had given her. Every time she reached for her phone, her fingers hovered over the numbers, but she couldn't bring herself to dial. She couldn't go back into that world, the world of power and danger that Vincent seemed to inhabit so easily. But no matter how hard she tried to convince herself otherwise, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was already tied to him, whether she liked it or not. The call never came. She didn't know what she expected, but after a few days of silence, she found herself driving down familiar streets, her mind drifting back to Vincent's words. You're already in this. She thought of her daughter, Ellie, who was always her priority, always the center of her world. But the more Mia thought about it, the more she realized she couldn't protect Ellie from the world. Maybe Vincent could, though. Maybe that was the answer she had been avoiding. The thought of trusting him made her stomach turn, but the reality was undeniable. The accident had changed everything. It wasn't just about saving a man anymore. It was about saving herself. About surviving. She found herself pulling into a parking lot in front of a sleek, black building that stood like a fortress in the middle of the city. The Romano building. The card in her hand seemed heavier than it had before, almost as if it had been waiting for her. Taking a deep breath, Mia stepped out of the car, her heels clicking against the pavement as she made her way to the entrance. The security guards barely looked at her as she walked through the grand doors, their cold eyes scanning her with indifference. She wasn't sure what to expect when she stepped into the elevator, but when the doors opened to the 15th floor, she felt a rush of tension in the air, as if the very walls were watching her. She didn't know why she felt this way. After all, it wasn't her first time in a building like this. But everything about this place, the marble floors, the expensive decor, the faint scent of cologne in the air, felt like a different world. Vincent's world. A man in a suit greeted her at the door to his office. Ms. Turner, he said, his voice smooth, almost rehearsed. Mr. Russo is expecting you. Mia followed him down a hallway that seemed to stretch endlessly before her. The air felt thick with anticipation, and her nerves were fraying at the edges. She wasn't sure if she was walking toward salvation or danger. When they reached the office, Vincent was waiting, as if he'd been expecting her. His tall frame was silhouetted against the large windows, the city lights casting shadows over his sharp features. Mia, he said, his voice calm, almost too calm. I'm glad you came. Mia swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his gaze on her. She wanted to refuse, to walk away and never look back. But she knew it was too late for that. She was already in this, whether she wanted to be or not. What now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vincent stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. Now, we make sure you're safe. You've made the right choice. Mia didn't know what to say to that. The words were too heavy, too loaded. Safe from what? She asked, her heart racing. From everything, he replied, his voice low and reassuring. From the people who would harm you for knowing too much. From the dangers you don't even know exist yet. Mia's breath caught in her throat. She didn't know what he meant, but she was starting to realize that it didn't matter. She had made a choice the moment she walked through those doors. A choice to trust him. A choice to let him into her life, even if she wasn't sure how much she could handle. Vincent reached into his pocket and pulled out another card, handing it to her without a word. It was the same black card, the one that had changed everything. "Call me when you need me," he said. "I'll be waiting." Mia looked at the card, the weight of it in her hand feeling heavier than ever. It was a lifeline, but it also felt like a noose around her neck. She knew she had crossed a line she couldn't uncross, and there was no turning back now. Mia couldn't shake the weight of Vincent's words. "You belong with me now." Every time she closed her eyes, she could see his intense gaze, hear his deep voice, and feel the subtle pressure of his presence in her mind. She had tried to go back to her routine, tried to focus on her daughter, Ellie, and her work at the hospital, but something kept pulling her back to him. That night, when she got home after another long shift, she found herself standing in front of the mirror, staring at the black card he had given her. She had been avoiding it for days, but now, there it was, staring back at her, waiting. Mia's hand hovered over the card, her fingers trembling slightly. She didn't know what she expected to find if she called him, but she couldn't deny the fact that she was curious. What had she gotten herself into? She had already crossed a line, she knew that. The moment she stepped into that world, there was no going back. It wasn't just about saving a man from a truck anymore. It was about survival, about finding a way to navigate this dangerous world Vincent had drawn her into. Taking a deep breath, Mia finally picked up the phone. Her fingers shook as she dialed the number on the card. The phone rang twice before Vincent's calm, confident voice answered. "Mia," he said simply, as if he had been expecting her. "I knew you'd come." She swallowed hard, the sound of his voice sending a shiver down her spine. "I don't know what to do," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what I'm getting myself into." "You're getting into safety," Vincent replied, his tone reassuring. "I told you I'd take care of you. You don't have to worry anymore. You're under my protection now." Mia's heart raced, her mind still trying to process everything. She wanted to argue, to tell him that she didn't need anyone's protection. But deep down, she knew he was right. She had seen too much, and the world Vincent lived in was far more dangerous than she could ever imagine. "Where do I go from here?" Mia asked, her voice barely a whisper. "You come to me," Vincent said, his voice gentle but firm. "I'll be waiting for you." Mia hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Okay," she said quietly, her mind made up. "I'll come." The call ended, and Mia sat there for a moment, the weight of her decision sinking in. She had made up her mind, but now the reality of what she had just agreed to was beginning to hit her. She had just entered a world that wasn't hers, a world that was far more dangerous than anything she had ever known. But there was no turning back now. She had to trust Vincent. He had offered her protection, and in a way, that was all she had left. Mia didn't know what would happen when she walked into that world, but she knew one thing for sure. Her life would never be the same again. Mia arrived at the Romano building a few days later, her heart pounding in her chest with every step she took. She had tried to talk herself out of it, tried to convince herself that it was all a mistake, but deep down she knew there was no turning back. The decision had been made. She had to see this through. As she walked through the sleek, glass doors, the reality of her situation hit her. The building was more impressive in person, its modern architecture standing tall and imposing, like a fortress in the heart of the city. She followed the same man in a suit who had greeted her before, her feet moving almost mechanically as they ascended in the elevator. The doors opened to the 15th floor, and Mia felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She wasn't sure if it was fear or anticipation, but something about this place made her feel out of place. She had never belonged in this world of wealth and power. As they reached the door to Vincent's office, the man opened it for her, and Mia stepped inside. Vincent was waiting, standing by the large windows, looking out over the city. He turned when he heard her enter, his gaze locking onto hers with that same intensity she had seen before. "Mia," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "I'm glad you came." She couldn't bring herself to speak at first. The weight of everything that had happened, everything that was still happening, was too much. She had always prided herself on being in control, but in this moment, she felt like she was losing grip on everything. "I didn't know what to expect," she said finally, her voice a little shaky. "But I'm here now." Vincent nodded, his expression softening slightly. "You made the right choice," he said. "I know it's not easy to trust someone like me, but I'm here to protect you, Mia. You're safe now." Mia swallowed hard, trying to make sense of his words. Protect me, she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. From what? Vincent's expression darkened, and for a brief moment, Mia saw a flicker of something dangerous in his eyes. From everything, he said quietly. From the people who would do anything to keep you quiet. From the dangers you don't even know about yet. Mia felt a chill run down her spine. She wasn't sure if she was more frightened by the things Vincent was saying or the fact that she was starting to believe him. I'm not sure I understand, she said, her voice trembling. What do you want from me, Vincent? Vincent stepped closer, his presence overwhelming, and Mia couldn't help but take a step back. I want you to stay with me, he said simply. I want to protect you, to make sure nothing happens to you. Mia's heart raced. She wasn't sure what she had expected, but it wasn't this. The idea of being under his protection, of living in this world, felt both terrifying and strangely comforting at the same time. But why me? She asked, her voice breaking. Why do you want me here? Vincent paused, his eyes never leaving hers. Because you saved my life, he said, his voice low and steady. And because I owe you. More than you'll ever know. Mia stood there, trying to process his words. She had never felt so out of place, so vulnerable. And yet, she couldn't ignore the pull between them, the way his presence seemed to fill the room. She didn't know what this was, but she knew one thing for sure. She was in this now. And there was no going back. Mia spent the next few days in a fog, trying to adjust to the new reality she had unwillingly stepped into. Vincent's words echoed in her mind constantly, reminding her that there was no turning back. You belong with me now. She had never asked for any of this. She had simply wanted to get through life, raise her daughter, and keep her head down. But now, she had no choice but to accept that everything had changed. Every moment she tried to focus on Ellie, her daughter, she was interrupted by thoughts of Vincent. His presence loomed over her in a way that she couldn't ignore. There was something about him, something dangerous yet magnetic, that pulled her deeper into his world with every passing day. She could feel his eyes on her, even when they weren't in the same room. She could feel his protection, his watchful gaze. Mia hated it. She hated the feeling of being controlled, of not being in control of her own life. But at the same time, she couldn't deny that part of her had begun to rely on it. She was beginning to trust him, against her better judgment. The phone call came unexpectedly one afternoon as she was about to leave work. It was Vincent. Mia, his voice was as calm and composed as always. Yet there was an underlying urgency that made her stomach twist. I need you to come to the estate tonight. Mia hesitated. She hadn't been to his estate since the night she had agreed to let him protect her. Why? What's going on? She asked, her voice tight with suspicion. It's nothing to worry about, Vincent replied smoothly. Just a little business to attend to, but I need you there. Mia's instinct screamed at her to refuse, but something in his voice made her feel like she had no other choice. All right, she said quietly. I'll be there. Later that evening, Mia found herself driving to the Romano estate once again. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know why she was nervous. She had been to his mansion before, but tonight felt different. She arrived at the gates, the security guards recognizing her immediately and letting her through without question. The grand iron gates swung open, and Mia drove down the long, winding driveway toward the mansion that seemed to rise up out of the night like some kind of fortress. The lights in the yard were dim, casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawn. When she entered the house, she was greeted by the same man in a suit who had led her through the halls before. He didn't say much as he led her to the sitting room. There, Vincent was waiting, standing by the window, his back to her as he gazed out over the city. Mia, he said when he heard her enter, his voice soft but commanding, as if he were the only person in the world that mattered. I'm glad you came. Mia didn't know how to respond. She was still trying to wrap her head around everything that had happened in the past few days, but one thing was clear. She had been pulled into something much larger than herself. Something she wasn't sure she could escape. What's going on? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vincent turned to face her, his eyes locking onto hers. There are things you don't understand yet, he said, his tone serious. Things that could put you in danger. I need you to trust me, Mia. I'm doing everything I can to protect you. Mia felt a chill run down her spine. She didn't know if she was ready to trust him completely, but she could see in his eyes that he was serious, that he wasn't going to let anything happen to her. I don't want to be a part of this world, she said, her voice cracking. I never asked for any of this. Vincent's gaze softened slightly, but his resolve remained. I know you didn't, but you're already in it, Mia. There's no going back now. She felt trapped, suffocated by the weight of the situation, but she couldn't help but feel a strange sense of security in his presence. She didn't want to need him, but she did. What do you need from me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vincent stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. I need you to stay. Stay with me, and let me protect you. Mia stood frozen for a moment, her heart racing. She wasn't sure if she was ready for this, but she knew one thing. Her life had already been changed, and there was no going back. Mia stood there, frozen in Vincent's presence. Every word he said felt like it was pulling her deeper. Into a world she didn't understand, a world she had never asked to be a part of. His gaze never left her, his eyes intense and filled with something she couldn't quite place. Perhaps concern, perhaps something darker. He had asked her to stay with him, to trust him, and as much as she hated to admit it, she couldn't deny that she was starting to do just that. She felt her heart race, but it wasn't just fear she was feeling. There was something else, something that made her feel safe despite everything. What do you want from me? She asked again, her voice more steady this time. Vincent took a slow step closer, his towering figure seeming to take up the entire room. I want you to understand, he said softly. This world, this life, it's not easy. It's dangerous, and it can take everything from you in an instant. But I'll protect you, Mia. I won't let anything happen to you. Mia swallowed, the words sinking in deeper than she had expected. Her whole life, she had prided herself on being independent, on doing everything for her daughter, Ellie. Now, here she was, in this grand house, in a world she didn't know, with a man who seemed to have more power than anyone she had ever met. She wanted to run, to go back to her simple life, but something in Vincent's voice, in his presence, made her hesitate. She had already made a choice. Whether she wanted to accept it or not, she was already part of this world now. And what if I don't want to be a part of it? Mia asked, her voice quieter this time, almost a whisper. Vincent's face softened for the briefest moment, his expression more human than she had ever seen. I'm not asking you to like it, Mia, he said, his voice sincere. But you've seen things. You've heard things. You can't go back to how things were. You can't pretend like none of this is happening. Mia looked down at the floor, trying to process everything. He was right. She couldn't ignore what had happened, couldn't erase the fact that she had been pulled into his world. But she still had a choice. She could still walk away, if she wanted. Or so she told herself. I just want to keep Ellie safe, she said, her voice cracking. Slightly. I can't be a part of this world and still be the mom I need to be. Vincent stepped closer, his presence almost overwhelming. You can, he said firmly. I'll make sure of it. You won't have to choose between your daughter and your safety. I'll make sure nothing happens to either of you. His words felt like a promise, a heavy promise that he was willing to keep. Mia looked up at him, meeting his gaze. For the first time, she saw something in his eyes that made her believe him. Maybe it was the way he spoke, or the way he had never once wavered in his determination to protect her. But there was something in the depth of his eyes, a quiet certainty that made her feel like she wasn't as alone in this as she had thought. I don't know what's going to happen, she said slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. But I'm here. Vincent's lips curled into a slight smile, one that was both warm and calculating. That's all I need to hear, he said softly. You're safe now, Mia, and that's all that matters. She felt a mix of emotions swirl inside her. Fear, confusion, and even a little bit of relief. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in days, she felt like she could breathe again. She wasn't sure if trusting Vincent was the right thing to do, but she was in this now. There was no turning back. Mia woke up the next morning with a sense of dread that clung to her like a thick fog. She had spent the night in a restless sleep, tossing and turning, her thoughts racing. It wasn't just about the things she had learned about Vincent, about his world. It was about the decision she had made. She had crossed a line that she couldn't uncross. She had allowed herself to be pulled into something that felt bigger than her, and now there was no way out. Her phone buzzed beside her on the nightstand, interrupting her thoughts. She picked it up and saw Vincent's name on the screen. Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected him to reach out so soon, but there was no turning back now. She answered the phone, her voice shaky. Mia, Vincent's voice came through the line, calm and steady as always. I need to see you. Mia hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to say. What's going on? She asked, her curiosity getting the better of her. I just want to make sure you're okay, he said, his tone softening. There's something I need to explain to you. Mia's stomach churned. She didn't know what he meant by that, but she had a feeling it wasn't going to be good. I'll be there in an hour, she said, already knowing that she had no choice but to go. An hour later, Mia found herself back in the Romano building, walking through the familiar marble halls toward Vincent's office. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and she could feel the weight of her decision pressing down on her with every step. She had no idea what he wanted, but she knew that whatever it was going to change everything. When she stepped into his office, Vincent was waiting by the window, his back to her. As she entered, he turned to face her, his eyes locking onto hers with that familiar intensity. Mia, he said softly, his voice carrying a strange mix of warmth and authority. I'm glad you came. Mia stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say. The air between them felt thick with unspoken tension, and she could feel her pulse quicken as she waited for him to speak. There's a lot you don't know, he said finally, his voice low. And I think it's time you did. Mia's brow furrowed. What do you mean? She asked, trying to keep the fear from creeping into her voice. I mean that you're not just here by chance, Vincent replied. You've been a part of something much bigger than you realize. And now, you're in this whether you want to be or not. Mia took a step back, her mind racing. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice trembling. Vincent walked toward her slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. I'm talking about the people who want to silence you, he said quietly. The people who would do anything to keep you from knowing too much. Mia's stomach dropped. She hadn't realized the gravity of the situation until now. She had been so focused on the danger she thought Vincent represented that she hadn't fully understood the real threats surrounding her. I didn't ask for any of this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You didn't have a choice, Vincent said, his voice firm but not unkind. But you're in this now, Mia, and I'm not going to let anything happen to you. Mia felt her breath catch in her throat as she processed his words. She wasn't sure what was worse, the fact that she was already in danger, or the fact that she was starting to believe Vincent when he said he would protect her. I don't know if I can trust you, she said, her voice wavering. You don't have to trust me, Mia, he replied. But you have to trust that I'll keep you safe. Mia stood there in silence, trying to make sense of everything. She wasn't sure if she could trust Vincent, but for the first time since this whole mess had begun, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't completely alone. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. Vincent was right. She was in this now, and there was no turning back.